March 18, 1912, San Antonio, Texas, 8:55 in the morning. Passenger locomotive number 704 operated in Southern Pacific's San Antonio yard, effectively turned into a bomb. 16,000 pounds of boiler metal were hurled roughly 1,200 feet through the air. The boiler head flew in the opposite direction, roughly the same distance. Contemporary reports describe heavy debris raining down as far as 7 blocks away. One woman did not survive when the front end of the locomotive crashed through the roof of her house. At least 26 people lost their lives, and some later estimates suggest the number may have been higher. Nobody knows the exact number, because some of the replacement workers were using assumed names and were never formally identified. The blast flattened everything within about 100 feet of the engine, rocked buildings across surrounding neighborhoods, and scattered wreckage for blocks, according to contemporary accounts and later retellings. Within a short time, soldiers and medical staff from Fort Sam Houston arrived, alongside police and firefighters, trying to maintain order as thousands of onlookers poured in by foot and streetcar. Search crews started going through the wreckage. According to contemporary reports, Assistant Roundhouse Foreman James Valentine was identified by the pistol he was carrying. A lot of men were armed back then. Contemporary accounts say shop painter Jose Fuentes and another worker, Robert Montiel, were so badly torn apart that identification was difficult or incomplete. Walter Jordan was the senior engineer, with more time on the throttle than anyone else in the Southern Division. They found him in the yard, and it took the crews a while to figure out who he was. That same evening, a local investigation board was formed, dominated by Southern Pacific officials and other industrial and military figures. The president and vice president of Alamo Iron Works, a U.S. Army colonel, and senior railroad technicians were on that board. Everyone wanted answers fast, and everyone had their own theory. Sabotage. That is what people were whispering about immediately. The fireman supposedly forgot his watch that morning, and he left right before the explosion. The repair supervisor's wife had begged him not to go to work. When investigators dug through the wreckage, they found the safety valve screwed down tight. Newspapers kept asking if there was dynamite residue. You've got to understand what was happening in 1912. This explosion did not happen in a vacuum. September 30th, 1911. Roughly 30,000 shopmen walked off the job on the Harriman lines. Southern Pacific Illinois Central, the whole system. Machinists, boilermakers, blacksmiths, car repairmen. They wanted the railroad to negotiate with their new federation instead of dealing with each union separately. The railroad said no and brought in replacement workers, strikebreakers. A lot of them were black men and immigrants who needed the work and did not have options. Critics at the time argued the railroad did not train them properly. Violence broke out across the country. Shootings in Macomb, Mississippi. A union official was taken down in Mojave, California. 5 replacement workers were ambushed on a road. There were at least 7 reported dynamite attacks on Harriman property during the strike. This was the tail end of what historians call the Age of Industrial Violence. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 saw over 100 casualties. The Pullman Strike in 1894 left 30 people gone in Chicago alone. Labor disputes back then regularly turned into actual warfare. San Antonio in March 1912 was a powder keg, and everyone knew it. Many of the guys who went down in that explosion were the replacement workers. The old hands like Jordan had their doubts about the scab work. They had seen what inexperienced repairs could do. He had been doing this job longer than almost anyone. He knew what sloppy work looked like. The locomotive had been in a wreck back in December near Seguin. It spent 3 months getting fixed up. According to later research by historian Farrell Tucker, it even passed a test run shortly before the explosion. Everything looked fine on paper. Later accounts say that morning, the pressure equipment showed a problem, and someone made the decision to shut the engine down. Then they made another decision. They started it up again. Later investigators would argue that decision pushed an already dangerous situation over the edge. So was it sabotage? Did a striker rig the safety valve? Did someone deliberately set up the explosion? On March 22nd, The Interstate Commerce Commission took over the investigation behind closed doors. No evidence of explosives, no dynamite residue, no proof of sabotage. What they found was simpler and somehow worse. The safety valves had been screwed down too tight by someone who did not know what they were doing. The steam gauge was busted, so whoever was firing the engine had no idea how much pressure was actually building up in there. The boiler was already below standard. An inexperienced worker had been allowed to set critical safety equipment. That is negligence, plain and simple. According to contemporary newspaper reports, the railroad settled the lawsuits out of court and paid around $4,000 to at least 2 families. Serious money in 1912. So what actually happened inside that boiler? Steam locomotives run on pressure. You heat water in a sealed metal container until it turns to steam. Trap that steam until you have 200 pounds per square inch pushing against every surface inside the boiler. Then let it out in controlled bursts to move pistons. It works great as long as the metal holds and you keep water covering the hottest parts. The hottest part is the crown sheet. That is the top of the firebox, the metal plate directly above the fire. You have a coal fire burning at 2200 degrees Fahrenheit right underneath this sheet of steel. The only thing keeping that steel from melting is water on the other side, constantly pulling heat away and turning into steam. If the water level drops and the crown sheet gets exposed, the steel heats up past 1200 degrees in seconds. At that temperature, steel stops being steel. It goes soft, loses all its strength, and the pressure inside just punches through. Water at 200 pounds per square inch boils at 386 degrees. The second that pressure drops, all that superheated water tries to turn into steam at once. Water expands 1,600 times when it flashes to vapor. In a large locomotive boiler, vast amounts of water can flash into steam in a fraction of a second, releasing energy comparable to that of a major industrial or military explosion. Engineers call it a bleve, a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. The Interstate Commerce Commission blamed excessive steam pressure caused by improperly set safety valves on a boiler that was already below recognized standards. The double boiling theory came later. Someone had screwed down the safety valve that should have been releasing excess pressure. The gauge that should have warned them was broken. The boiler that probably needed more work got put back into service too soon. And a bunch of guys who were just trying to make rent went down because the people who knew what they were doing were on strike, and the people doing the job had no idea what they were doing. Walter Jourdan knew. He spent extra time that morning checking everything because he did not trust it. It was not enough. 4 months after the explosion, Mayor Brian Callahan Jr. passed away from kidney failure. He had been mayor for 9 terms, 16 years total, and he ran a political machine that controlled the city. He spoke 4 languages and had connections to every ethnic community in San Antonio. He built roads, sewers, and parks. Born rich, he ended up broke. Some people thought the timing was suspicious, but chronic nephritis does not care about conspiracy theories. Within weeks of the explosion, local newspaper reports say the city council tried to pass a boiler inspection law requiring examinations and certification. It was the first time anyone in San Antonio had seriously tried to regulate industrial safety. According to early 20th century federal statistics, tens of thousands of railroad employees were killed and millions were injured between the 1890s and World War I, with a large share of those casualties occurring in shops and roundhouses. Boiler explosions were just part of the cost of doing business. The strike dragged on until 1915. The unions lost and the railroad kept running. San Antonio kept growing. Fort Sam Houston is still there. Locomotive number 704 is gone. Most of it ended up scattered across 7 city blocks. Some pieces were probably never found. Physics, bad decisions, and terrible timing. That is what took those 26 people.